Hello and welcome to another Mastering the Craft with me, Sefid. Today I'm going to look at creeping. This has been a highly requested topic. A lot of people want to know a bit more about how to think about creeping, how to do it well, how to do it effectively. This particular comment asks for videos specifically for each race. Go over some of the common maps and explain how to creep in the early game. I really do want to cover this topic in great detail, which is why this is episode 1 of a sub-series of creeping, because creeping is a huge part of the game, and it would be a disservice for me to try and cover everything in one single video. So that's why I'm going to look at a very specific matchup and map. So we're going to look at playing the Blademaster on Concealed Hill against Human, and that's how specific you need to be when you're looking at this, because I don't think I would do you much of a service if I were to say, oh, what you should do is you should creep to level 3 with the Archmage. I don't know, what can you do with that? I could tell you on Terran Stand that if you crept your Merc camp and then the little priest guys and then your expansion, that gives you level 3. But that's not a lot of information that I'm giving there. That's just one creep route out of a possible, I don't know, 200 if you consider all matches, all matchups, all races, all maps as well. So there's hundreds of potential creep routes depending on what's going on. So you need to think about the specific map. You need to think about what heroes you're going, what your game plan is, what your opponents are doing, all these sort of things. And I'm going to hopefully go through a learning process I went through learning how to play Blademaster on Concealed Hill against Human. Because before I made this video, I was mostly going for the Farseer Windrider style, where you fast tech to Windriders and then play off that and creep the map a lot. But I've noticed that the Blademaster is a viable strategy, a viable style on Concealed Hill, so I wanted to learn how to play that. So this video, along with me, you'll be learning how to do that, because when I started, I didn't know how to do that, but now I do. So we'll talk a little bit about the basics of creeping for anyone who is completely new. You creep for 4 main reasons. That's experience points, items, gold in exceptional circumstances, whether that's expanding or if you need to actually get gold when your mine runs out, and access to the neutral resources, so Goblin Labs, Mercs. So for XP, you have these milestones of levels. Levels are obviously very important. You get another skill point and your hero they get more statistics. But this varies depending on the hero. So the Blademaster, for example, really wants level 2. That can be quite nice with the crit. I mean, level 3, of course, is good with a level 2 Windwalk. But you want these for different reasons. So level 2 crit makes you more effective at creeping, makes you more effective at killing units. Level 3 with Windwalk makes you more effective at scouting, makes you more effective at finding your opponent on the map and being able to steal creeps, that sort of thing. So also in other cases, if you play Human, you'll want to have that level 3 milestone with your Archmage or your Mountain King, because that can be really important for your power spike. If you want to, for example, if a human wants to push an Orc's burrows, having level 3 really helps that. So there's also denying that from your opponent. So you want levels and you want your opponent not to have them. And this can be it can get quite in depth here about denying experience. Just even hitting one creep, taking it off your opponent, might stop them from getting level 2, and that might delay them in some way. This is quite common against undead. You deny by taking creep camps off them, or not letting them take creep camps off you. That keeps them at low levels for longer, because effectively against undead, if you don't keep the hero levels down, they will eventually win. That's how it really works against undead. So this can be quite important and play quite a big role. And of course, the third is keeping busy. If you've got nothing else to do, get some more experience on your heroes, because that might mean in the middle of an important fight, you might hit level 5 and get that important level 3 ability, like say Stomp for your Tauren Chieftain or level 3 Heal for your Shadowhunter. These are important things. Items. In some cases, items are more important than experience. This depends on the heroes. The maps naturally have been designed around certain meta heroes, so level 2 permanent items benefit agility heroes more than other heroes, which is why you will see the Blademaster creeping for the level 2 permanent items, the claws, the gloves, the circlet, and the ring of protection. Therefore, you have to know the drops on the maps. You have to know what drops from what camps, so that you know what is good for your race to drop, and you know what is good against your opponent's race or against your opponent's hero. If you're playing against an orc, you probably want to creep camps that give you the level 2 or I can't remember if it's level 2 or 3, level 3 charged items, which are the healing potions or the invulnerability potions or the mana potions. They're really good against orc. If you're a human, you probably want to creep those as a priority. And undead, of course, really important. If you think about Turtle Rock as well, against orc, you probably really want to take the shop and get that rune of the Watcher. That's very important against orc. It stops them from controlling the shop as effectively. Naturally, if you fight in that area, you'll be able to see the Blademaster if you ever want to fight him there. It stops the orc controlling the map as well, and also it lets you see if their army is moving around on the map, which lets you know where you can creep a bit safer. And you need to then learn how to use the items. So items like sentry wards or the wand of illusions, items like this, learn how to use those effectively, and they'll do work for you. Moving on to gold, we're going to go quite quick through this, try and get to the games as quickly as we can. Expanding, you want to clear creeps so that you can expand. Night Elf doesn't need to do this as much because they often build their expansion further away, then walk it there, and then creep at the same time, but the principle's the same. And then often as a last resort, if you've run out of gold entirely, you might need to kill a few creeps to buy a clarity that might win you the game, that sort of thing. Now, access is the last thing. Access is to do with expanding and to do with mercenary camps and laboratories. So in certain circumstances, generally actually, if you're going to do a fast expansion, this is more important, because if you're fast expanding, you will have more gold, but less tech, which means you might need to rely on mercenaries more. Mercenaries also are good against Night Elf, so they can counter Entangle and Treants, and probably against Human as well. Human Mirror, you will see both humans usually creep their mercenary camps as a priority, because they want that the Forest Troll Priest, because the Forest Troll Priest is a source of healing which human don't have very early, and also it dispels the water elementals. So in Human Mirror, it's very rare that you won't see them creep the mercenary camps. Same for the lab. In certain circumstances, you want Zeppelins or Shredders, so it's good to have access to that. Now, how to know where to creep? Well, you have to learn the map. You have to know what drops and how hard the creeps are and what you can kill with, say, a Blademaster, or how many units you need to creep a certain camp effectively. And you need to know good ideas about how far away your opponents are. And you need to know a little bit about what's good for your opponent on the map, because then that tells you where it's safe to creep. You need to learn the matchup. You need to know, if you're playing human, you need to know if you can get away with creeping a certain camp before a Keeper of the Grove turns up, or a Death Knight, or a Blademaster. Or in Mirror, you might need to know if there's an effective timing where you can creepjack them when they're doing a very big camp, that sort of thing. So that's why we're going to look specifically at one map and one matchup, because otherwise there's just too much to talk about. And that will be Orc versus Human, from the Orc's point of view, and it'll be on Concealed Hill. And it'll be more specifically about what to do with the Blademaster early game, although we will briefly look at a Farseer game, because I think it expands on my point about knowing the map and the matchup and knowing how to creep effectively. So we'll go into some of the games now. Welcome to Concealed Hill. We're going to watch from the Orc point of view. This is Focus versus Sock on the NetEase ladder. And we're going to pay attention to his build order first of all. Build order is part of your creep route. So what Focus does is he builds the Voodoo Lounge when he has 30 wood. So he doesn't build the second burrow, he builds the Voodoo Lounge ahead of the second burrow. And he puts it up here so that he has better control in this area of the map. He can just easily access his Voodoo Lounge. And if you'll notice, the timing on this is perfect. If you build this as soon as you have 30 wood, you're able to kill this Ogre Warrior, get back here, and grab Salve and Speed Scroll and head out onto the map very quickly. And so that is a perfect timing for Voodoo Lounge. Make sure, if you're ever watching an Orc player and studying their build order and what they're doing, you want to make sure you pay attention to when they build their shop. Their shop will be precisely timed to be useful. So sometimes they'll maybe be harassing, and you as an Orc player, you sort of know, okay, at some point soon I'm going to have to go home, so then you put your shop down. That'll be after your tech. Now, quite often, what you'll actually see with two burrow techs with no shop, which is more of like a Farseer kind of play, it's like a sort of safe Farseer play. I mean, more often than not, you see Farseer with one burrow techs, but you can see Farseer with two burrow techs. They will often put the shop down immediately after they tech. and that's because they plan to play out on the map and then come back home, and they'll need that shop there when they get home. But if they're a little greedy, they might go for the third burrow first, so it's a bit safer to build the third burrow if they really do not think that the Voodoo Lounge is necessary, if they think they can get away with it. That's a bit scary though, because sometimes you'll end up building a Voodoo Lounge just as, say, a human with a water elemental and a bunch of footmen come to cancel your third burrow, which is very sad. But anyway, enough talking about that. We're talking about creeping this game. Now, the features on this map that are important to talk about with respect to creeping, we already mentioned that we have this Ogre Lord in the center, which is a unique aspect of this map. There's only one of these creep camps, so you need to be fighting over that, and you can't let your opponent take that for free at all. Even if you lose it, you have to make them at least pay for it. That's fine. And then the other thing, these creep camps are deceptively important because they're very easy to kill in the early game, but they potentially drop a tome of experience. This Spider Crab Limb Ripper, he has the 5 options of dropping the +2 tomes of agility, strength, or intelligence, then the tome of knowledge, which is +1 to everything, and then the tome of XP is the other one. So with that in mind, Focus knows that. Focus's plan roughly is to make sure he controls these creep camps and is able to kill as much of it as he can, ideally both, probably not both. And with that in mind, he actually sends his grunt this way because he expects his opponent to be creeping this camp, because both players in this game, they know how valuable this creep camp is. So his grunt is scouting where he thinks that his opponent will be. He sees he get level 2, and he immediately backs off for an opportunistic attack. So this is part of what I mentioned about how it's very difficult for me to say there's a fixed creep route, because actually I think the correct decision here was to take this opportunistic attack. He saw that the human was creeping here and was fairly close to his base, so he's in his area of map control. He can punish that a little bit. And when the human kills this creep camp, there's not a lot of places they can go around here. They can't really push further onto the creep, onto the orc side of the map. That's very difficult. So they have to retreat quite far. And at that point, the most likely option is here. This is actually the next most likely option. And I'm sure Focus knows this. And Focus, of course, as I mentioned, wants to control this creep camp because it's very easy to kill and very high value. So if we talk about this, he actually baits that. That's quite nice. You can do that as a human. If you attack that creep, that trapper will attack and snare that. So again, Focus wanted to creep this, so his route was going to be do this, and then do this, and then if it's still there, do this probably, because these are both very high value creep camps. But he didn't get the chance to. So just because Focus is fighting the human a lot here doesn't mean to say that this doesn't tell you a lot about how you should plan your creeping, because he's creeping opportunistically and he's attacking opportunistically. So when it makes sense to creep, he creeps. When it makes sense to attack, he attacks. And that is the essence of what I was trying to say about how creep routes are very difficult to prescribe, very fixed, because I think he's made the correct decision so far and when to attack and when to not attack. And, you know, although this hurts that he lost the grunt here at the health fountain, this does cost Sock something. It costs him time. He had to send his Archmage all the way down here. He had to do that. He did that instead of creeping something else, which might be here, which of course Focus is expecting, which is why he has the grunt here. So Focus is thinking about all the various options that that Sock has and is preparing for them. So he's preparing for this. He prepared for this, and then when he knows that the human is not doing anything effective, he creeps. When he thinks that he can hurt the human, he attacks. In this case, he gets the Tome of Agility +2, which is very nice. Bit of extra damage, bit of extra armor. It's very good. So he's got these grunts in all the spots where he expects Sock to be, where he thinks Sock would be getting an advantage. And if he could find them, he's again sending the grunt here, then he can take advantage of that. So what we'll see now is an example of what to do at tier 2. So I would say what Focus has done primarily so far is he's controlled the map really well. He's made Sock pay to come on his side of the map here. He's prevented him from creeping 2 very easy camps. And so realistically, all Sock has done is this creep camp and this creep camp. And he hasn't even finished that one, in fact. He actually did a bit of it and then ran away. So although he hasn't directly been attacking Sock a lot, he has managed to make it very difficult for Sock to creep. So now we're going to see about tier 2. Remember I mentioned that you don't necessarily want to clear a bunch of creep camps around your base and then have nothing for your level 2 hero. So it's very hard for anyone to control the map right at the start of the game. They don't have very many units. and the creeps proportionally are a lot more stronger. So if you are able to just go to a creep camp halfway across the map and attack early on, there's not a lot that your opponent could do, which is why Sock was able to take this creep camp here. And even now, Sock is fighting even just to stay in the middle of the map. It's already very difficult for him in this later stage in the game because the Blademaster has a few items and the extra pressure of the second hero. Now this is a cute little thing you can do on this map in particular. This is a bug and I think it'll actually get patched, so enjoy this while you can. If you bring the Ogre to his max distance and hex him, his AI goes a bit funny and he sort of gets disjointed from his creep camp, and so you can push him all the way back to a very long way to safely creep him. So yeah, this is a funny little thing, but this is actually quite common for orcs to do on this map, is to, once they get their Shadowhunter, which is a very scary sort of time for your opponent because you can hex and kill any unit you want to, effectively, that is when they will try and steal the Ogre Lord, because that's a very easy time for them to do that. They have a lot of map control, because if they come into fight with their opponent, they'll win, probably, and so therefore they can creep something very dangerous. So we've seen some patterns here. The Blademaster, then, as we mentioned, you want to creep for XP and items. The Blademaster wants items more than he wants experience at the very early part of the game. Items make a much bigger difference, so therefore we saw him creeping immediately for an item, and that's often why orcs will sell their TP and buy a circlet, because it's far more valuable to have that item. It's so valuable to have that item. Now on this particular map, there's the little quirk of the Tome of Experience chance, which you should always take a chance on, because it'll really help you on those times where it comes out. And then you see that when we get to level 2, tier 2, we want to be starting to creep these larger creep camps that that give us these better items. So the first of all, of course, was the Ogre Lord, which now Sock is finishing off that creep camp. So we want the Ogre Lord item. We want these big items from these creep camps when you get to tier 2. Now, if you'd gone for, say, this, and then this, and then this, it would be very, very difficult if you were, say, a human who did that creep route. If you'd went here, here, and then here, I could say, yeah, that's really good, that'll get you level 3. But then you would have no presence on the map for the rest of the game. Your opponent could have been creeping anywhere on here. They could have came down here and creeped your shop, and then they could have done the red, and then where would you have had as an option after that? You would only have the health fountain. So you need to be conscious of what your opponent's doing to know where you can creep. And so in the early game, specifically with Orc, but not always just with Orc, I think Undead and Night Elf do this as well, you want to creep as far onto the map as you can get away with. And that is kind of what you want to be doing in the early game when you have that strong power, because as I mentioned, the Blademaster, just a few items make a big difference, so he has quite a lot of strength in the early game. So use that in order to take creep camps far out onto the map. Now, this is just past the creeping stage now, and after this, it depends on who wins this fight, who gets to creep the rest of the map. So if the Orc ends up losing enough that they have to sit in their base for a while, then that means that human can creep camps like this, this, and this with impunity. And the same, if the human gets beaten back and effectively loses the fight, or has the TP, then that gives the Orc a lot of freedom to maybe push to take this, or even possibly, if they're really brave, to take this even, or possibly the expansion. So winning a fight gives you map control gives you creeps give you item and experience. So that's roughly how the flow of Warcraft 3 goes. And I'm not really going to follow this because it doesn't matter who wins, but that is how it would play out. So we'll go into the next game now because I'm conscious of time. I don't want these videos to go on too long. So here we have a little bit of a palate cleanser. We're going to watch Lynn play Farseer style here. This is the style I mentioned that I had been playing quite a lot, that I wanted to learn how the Blademaster style worked a bit better, so I wasn't always playing this style. The interesting thing to talk about creeping here is that there isn't any. The Orc doesn't do any creeping until tier 2. And I wanted to use this to sort of outline that you can do a lot of creeping without doing any in the early game. Because the comment that started this video was asking for some early game advice. Well, you know, not creeping is a valid thing to do in the early game. You can do this kind of harassment. I want to get through this fairly quickly because it's not what I'm really looking at, but I wanted to sort of show off a bit about tier 2 creeping. So we'll focus on the Shadow now because he is out. But the idea behind this broad game plan is that you slow the human down as much as you can, and then you get Wind Riders, two Beast 3 Wind Riders, and then you creep incredibly quickly from that point onwards. Then you use that very fast, very high DPS army to creep as much of the map as you can get away with. We're going to see Focus creep, that's not Focus, Lyn, sorry. We're going to see him creep both health fountains and the red camp, which is a huge deal, and it's why he wins this game, is that he's able to creep so effectively. Because even right now, although he's killed 2 heroes, there's actually still, like, the heroes of, I believe it's Bike he's playing as, are actually higher level even though they're dead, because he's got a 2 and a 1. But this is the point now where we'll see incredibly quick creeping. So we're going to see, first he's sort of creeping 2 at once here. He's creeping this camp really quickly, and then he's going to follow up by creeping this. There's a little trick you can do where you hex the Ogre, you pull the Ogre Lord really far back, then you hex it, and then he sort of disjoints. So creeping this camp, and then immediately creeping the Ogre Lord as quickly as he possibly can. And that gives us a very nice item, you know. Whatever you get from that's going to be a pretty good item. Hood of Cunning in this case. And then immediately we're going straight to the health fountain. We're going to creep that very quickly. Wind Riders are one of the few Orc units that can creep air units fast. So on a map where there are, you know, a bunch of very powerful air units that you want to creep, he's creeping. He crept there specifically just for the item. You remember I mentioned in the intro, sometimes you creep for items, sometimes you creep for XP. Well, it's quite clear that in this case he was creeping for items. We have a bit of a skirmish that sort of doesn't really go anywhere. Orc has to TP out. And then it's back to the grind of creeping everything as fast as you possibly can. So creep the shop really quickly. Look how fast that is. I know we're going to 4 times speed, but still. And then we're going to creep this camp. Now, Wind Riders are very good on this map in general because they take this chip damage, and the healing fountains are really good, and of course they can kill the healing. And there's also a lot of like pathing blockers as well. They can fly over, so like lots of trees in the middle here, because you often get in fights over the middle here. So being able to fly over these trees is quite nice. And I think I once had a fight where it was at this trees, and I just put the Wind Riders over these trees here, and the human wasn't really able to do very much. So you see, it's quite a good map for Wind Riders, which is why I was doing Wind Riders on it, but it's not the only option. So we've seen then, at this point in the game, we're 10 minutes in the game, and the Orc has crept this, well, for the item, the red in the middle, this, I think crept, not that one, sorry, this one, and I believe there was another camp somewhere as well. Oh yes, the Goblin Merchant. So that's a lot of creeping, and he's got some good items to show for it. He's got Hood of Cunning, Sylvie Mask, and Flute of Accuracy. Now the human has not creeped anywhere near as fast as that. Yet, there was no creeping at tier 1 for the Orc. The human has crept sort of this side of the map, and also this lab, but has given up all of this map control. So that was, this is an example where creep routes didn't really mean anything, but a lot of creeping happened. So if you're going to go for a style where you want to creep really, really fast, another example of this for a different race is Undead. As soon as you get that orb, you start creeping like we just saw Lyn doing here. You creep everything you possibly get your hands on. And the difference slightly there is that you don't have the mobility that Wind Riders do, and maybe not quite as fast at killing things, but and you perhaps don't have the map control either. But, you know, it's really good to do that. I don't really want to talk much more about this replay. We've got pressing matters. We're here to learn about the Blademaster, but I wanted to point out that in other styles, just get an advantage early that allows you the map control to creep everything. And that's what we see here. That's basically how Lyn wins this game, on the back of very strong items from all that creeping and very high hero levels. So let's go back to another focus game. So we have another game with focus here. This game, I think, is a lot more representative of like a real game scenario. I think this will probably look familiar to a lot of orcs, this sort of game state. And I thought it was probably one of the more standard-ish games that I could possibly think of to learn from, and they're sometimes some of the best. When you see what the pros are doing in these very typical situations, that can be very helpful to learn what to do yourself. So this is against Romantic, who is going for Archmage first, and we want to see what Focus does differently in response to things. So we've seen the same Voodoo Lounge opening to get this Ogre Warrior, get the salves, and then move out onto the map. And the priorities, of course, being these two green camps. We're going to expect Focus to fight over those as well. So you remember I mentioned in the first game that you send a grunt over here to scout, or maybe I didn't mention it. No, but we'll talk about it now then. What we're seeing Focus doing here then is he's scouting to make sure that the human isn't creeping that. If he sees the human creeping that, he will probably go there and attack, which is like what he did in the first game against Sock, when he saw Sock creeping this while he was heading here, and so he moved over to attack opportunistically. When he doesn't see that, he's going to go for the crab, try and get that tome of experience, but what actually happens is he sees that Romantic is going directly for his base. Now, the reason for that is that Focus went for a one burrow tech, and the correct response to that is to just go and kill the second burrow, which is what you're going to see Romantic do here. So he's got a level 1 Archmage. He's just going to get in here and kill this burrow. That's the goal, and that is the correct response to a one burrow tech. If you would like to know that as a human, just come and kill that burrow. That's really painful for the orc. Now, often good orcs will be able to parry it a little bit. They'll be able to do enough damage to your Archmage that you have to run away or something. So that was a really good slowing the orc down. It stops them getting their extra grunts out, which sort of backs up their production for the rest of the game. So that's quite a typical thing that you will see orcs have to deal with in the early game. So yeah, sends a grunt to the fountain, and he's back trying to fight over these camps, but again, he sees the human come back into his base to kill a burrow. Killing this burrow is very good. Force the Archmage back, and I think that Romantic did a lot of damage. I think that was very successful. I think that was worth it. He made the Blademaster running back and forward in the map a bit. The Blademaster never got much done. So what will we see Focus do to respond to this? So he's still going to fight over that green camp. He's still going to fight for the map control in the center. He's checking to make sure the Archmage isn't creeping here. So what we're seeing then is he's taken a lot of the Archmage's health. So what the Archmage will now have to do is either heal, which is why he checked here with his grunt and here with his blade, or the Archmage will have to do what is called evasion creeping. Now, if you look here, what you'll see is the Archmage has actually crept this, and that is quite an unusual camp. It's not one that really people prioritize, but when you have a low HP Archmage, that is possibly one of the few options you have. So knowing that is very helpful. So as a human, if you ever get in this situation where you dove deep in an orc space and you had to TP out, now you know that there's a few options. Either you can heal at the fountain, or you can do some hard to find creep camps, so somewhere where your opponent would not expect you. Now, if that happens, what you've effectively done is you've given up the middle of the map to the orc. The orc can creep these two creeps with absolute impunity, and if they get Tome of Experience, well, that's unfortunate, but that's the risk you played when you went that deep into the orc's base, and it was probably worth it in this case. Killing the burrows was really good. It delayed the orc quite significantly, so it was worth it. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. It's a bit of a trade-off. Now, I wanted to use this game to sort of talk about what I've learned, because I watched these 2 games of Focus and then a bunch more games as well on Concealed Hill, and I saw some patterns. So as we've discussed, this seems to be a fairly common build when you go on Blade first, is to go for this Ogre Warrior with the Voodoo Lounge nearby. And then what you do is you go for these greens, or you fight over them at least. You want to make sure that the human isn't getting them while you try and get them yourself. So in this game we saw Focus put a grunt here and send his blade here to try and do it. Then his grunt here also spotted that he was being rushed. So if you're doing a one burrow tech, you need to be aware of that. So doing these greens when you're doing a one burrow tech is would seem a little bit greedy. If you're doing a 2-burrow tech, you can probably be fairly safe in the knowledge that you could at least kill one of these camps before you have to come home and defend. We also know that this is quite a popular creep camp for humans to do about this point in the game. The human probably would usually do this the point after when he TP'd here, except he couldn't because he was on low health, so we know this is a popular creep camp to look out for, and it's good in general for Blademasters to be near shops. Blademasters can do good work near shops. They can sell items, buy items. And most shop creeps have an item that's worth stealing as well, so that's quite nice. And this shop in particular is good because it's quite close to the healing fountain, which is nice, and it's quite close to this, which is where you want to fight over. So I think what I've seen in many of my games, and this is not just on with Blademaster and not just on human versus orc, but because of the proximity of this green and this shop and how usually you want to be doing those creep camps at about the same time in the game, there's often a lot of tension here where you end up fighting over these two areas, or possibly, equally these two areas. And then the third thing we want to look at, now we know we want to do this ogre opening, we know we want to fight over these greens. The third thing is we want to get this ogre lord from the middle if we can. Once you have the hex or the ensnare, you have the tools to be able to take this ogre lord out really, really early. And you can see that that's on Focus's mind at the moment because he's stalking the human army with this Blademaster, making sure that the human can't get this ogre lord because it's very important. So yeah, we saw both Lynn and Focus in the previous games use that little bug to get the ogre lord, but you don't have to do that. You just pull them really far back. For a little bit of a note, creeps on Warcraft 3 maps, they have two modes. They can either be normal or they can be camp. And normal is a 500 range, so you go how far away from the creep camp those creeps will engage you. So that, I think the standard version for that is 500. So that would roughly be, if the ogre lord was there, that would roughly be like here-ish, I guess, around about. So if you had a unit that was there, then they'll come to there. Then the creeps will attack it, sorry. And then there's the camp size, which would be like, let's see, probably, is there anything still alive? Yeah, these guys will be camp, which means that you have to be within 200 range, which is probably about there or so. 500 range creeps are usually ones defending expansions. That is because then it's not possible for you to build an expansion nearby, and just the creeps won't bother you. Night Elf, of course, can do that in some circumstances. They can build like a little bit further out and then walk in. But that's why some creeps you can build Ancient of Wars right next to, and some you can't. Because the ones that are camps, which are 200 range aggro, you can build Ancient of Wars or Trees of Life right next to them. And from memory, I think every single expansion in competitive play has the normal, which is the 500 range distance, so that you can't abuse that by building expansions without killing the creeps. But there's many that are camp style, which are not at expos, and that's just worth knowing. This one is a normal, which is why you can bring the ogre lords so far away. And maybe that plays a part in the weird bug with the hex and that you can do, but I don't know if it does or not. In any case, that's all I really wanted to say, is that I now feel like I understand roughly how to play the early game of this matchup. So I know that I want to go for this ogre warrior with this build with the early shop. Then I want to fight over these greens, possibly using the shop to get some items like a circlet or whatever, and then I want to really try and take this ogre lord as soon as I can. So that would be a creep route that I've learned from watching a few replays. And even though in neither of those games that went perfectly for Focus, I was able to look at his game plan and see what his plan was to try and do that, and also with some context from the Lin game to know what's important. You know, these when Lin got the opportunity, he wanted to creep this as soon as possible as well. So with all that context, we can make some good assumptions about what's a good creep route for playing with the Blademaster against human on this map. Now, this was specifically against human, but this is not just this information could apply to other matchups as well. So perhaps against undead who are playing quite passive, I can also do this creep route. If an undead does the late hero build, then I know that I can pretty much do these greens on my own without having to worry about any interruption from the undead. In fact, you could probably do one of them and then go and attack. And if you got a Tome of Experience, that would be a very effective attack because you'd have a level 2 blade. And a level 2 blade against a Death Knight who just came out, that would be very sad for the Death Knight. So you can see how these sort of game plans form based on just studying the map a little bit. And of course, you can go into the map editor and look and see all of the drops and see what's good for your race. And so I would say, if you're looking to learn creep routes, think very specific to begin with. Learn one step at a time. And you only have to watch, in this case, I've shown 2 replays, and we've made some good guesses about where might be good places to go. So from now on, I'll always know how to play Blade early game against Human on Concealed Hill, because I've studied it a little bit, and I only watched 2 replays. So you don't have to watch a lot. You can watch your own replays, you can watch professional replays are good because they play lots of games and they drill these kind of creep routes very tightly so they know the timings on them perfectly. I would recommend watching pro replays, and I'd recommend downloading them from warcraft3.info, which has some great filters and a lot of people uploading good replays on there. So that's a good source. So here we are back at the slideshow, and I just want to finish off by saying what we've looked at today is orcs playing Blademaster against Human on Concealed Hill. You need to look at what you are struggling with in particular. So if there's a particular map, like this was the case for me, I didn't know really what the best options were for playing Blademaster on Concealed Hill. So I made this video and thought that might be a learning experience for you to see how I've learned a bit about how orcs play Blademaster on Concealed Hill, so that you can apply the same principles to learning yourself. Because unfortunately, there's I can't make 200 videos about every single possible combination like this. There will be Human videos on Terranus Stand for fast expansion builds. There'll be undead builds on Northern Isles for going up against Farseer Windriders, for example. And these are all, there's many combinations for what things you want to do on what map against what matchup. So if you're struggling against something, do this. Look at how other players are playing that matchup and try and look and see what they're doing well, what they could improve, what they could what you can learn from the replay, what they can teach you. And hopefully, like me, you'll have a better understanding after looking at a few replays, because I now feel like I'm confident enough to go play some Blademaster on the ladder against Human on Concealed Hill. And it's not like this isn't valuable in other ways. I mean, I've learned a lot about Concealed Hill, about playing Blademaster in general, so I could apply this also against Undead or Night Elf or in Mirror as well, although I think it's probably not very well advised to go for Blademaster on Concealed Hill in Mirror, but you know, that's just from what I see as the meta that people are playing. But so that's this video. If you are interested in sort of asking for your own request of something you'd like to know about, whether it's an example like this, I'm really struggling with playing Night Elf on Equiles against Human when they do a fast expand. If you want to know something like that, I can make a video on something specific like that. If you want to be specific, I would recommend you try and send me a replay. You can find me on the Discord and just talk to me on there. Links in the description. Or just leave a comment on the video and I'll get in contact with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.